Welcome to our January 2021 Southwest Manuscripters meeting. And our guest speaker today is Brandie June. So Brandie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, there I can see you too. Welcome, it's been years, hasn't it, since I approached you with coming and joining us, being a guest speaker, and a lot has happened in those few years. So we really appreciate your being with us today. And I guess to get started, do you remember about what age or how young or when did you first realize that reading and writing were something that really interests you, and then lead into your early inspirations and interest in what you read?
Sure. Definitely from an early age, I was really interested in reading. For me, it was always a great escapism. So I was a rather awkward child who grew into a rather awkward adult. So for me, reading, I loved the magic of reading, and always wanted to be transported to different worlds, and was always really kind of sad that I didn't actually have the ability to do magic. Um, and a lot of that, I think, translated into storytelling, because from an early age, I was very interested in acting. And I actually went to UCLA and majored in theater and spent several years focusing really on acting, and hadn't really thought about writing until the theater company I was with started a playwright program. And it started with just 10-minute short plays, because the idea of writing an entire play felt daunting and overwhelming, but 10 minutes was like, yeah, I can write a couple pages. And by starting to write short plays, that eventually branched out into me writing longer plays. And, between that and getting involved in NaNoWriMo, I realized that I enjoyed writing full-length novels and stories as well.
So how do you feel your acting then transitioned? How do you feel that they both help each other from a writer's perspective into acting and vice versa?
A lot of it's really about, at its core, it's storytelling. Whether you're telling the story through your actions and your words as an actor, or as the person who is kind of creating the story, either as a novelist or a playwright or a screenwriter, a lot of it all comes down to what is the story you're trying to tell. And my theater background has really helped me with my novel writing, because in a way it helps me sort of set stages and see the action in my head. And one of the first comments I got from my publishing editor is that my book read very had sort of a theatrical read to it, of a lot of the stage setting.
Very visual, very
Mm-hmm.
visual and active. And especially I know with the stage, you have to really get to the point, which is, I prefer more succinct writing than I myself am more of a Hemingway than a Tolstoy. So both you have to concentrate to really, getting into the focus of the core of the story.
Yeah, and in addition to the visuals, I think it also is helping, like when I embody a character, thinking of the different senses too, which is translated into my novel writing of not only what do things look like, but what does it smell like? If they're eating something, what does it taste like? What are the sounds? What is what is this? All the different sensories.
So you started with the playwriting,
Mm-hmm.
and then about at what stage did it transition into the other?
Well, it didn't exactly, it wasn't exactly a linear transition, because there were times where I was working on a play, and during NaNoWriMo I was also working on a novel. So it was more like these things were evolving as opposed to just changing completely over. And even now it's nice that I'll take a break from novel writing and I'll work on one of my plays. So it was more of a gradual evolution.
And then you were actively acting also, because you were involved prior to this lockdown. By the way, folks, for future viewers, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so we're not meeting in purpose. So prior to that, you were continuously active in an actor's troupe, you say?
Yeah, it's been a few years actually since I was really involved as an actor with them. It's more sort of evolved into being involved with them as a playwright. I've done some costume design with them, but ultimately, I haven't done a lot of acting in the last few years. There just isn't quite enough time. I also work full time, so kind of
Yes, we need to
focusing my
talk about
creative
that.
energy.
Tell us how that's working with your busy, because a lot of us here are retired, so it's like we don't envy you having to.
I do. It has taught me a lot of time management. I actually went to school and got my MBA in business while working full time, so that especially taught me a lot of time management. Um, so kind of using those skills to then leverage into, okay, I'm working full time, but I'm going to work on my writing, say an hour before work or during my lunch break, or 4 hours on the weekends. And that's been one way that's really helped me kind of achieve everything that I've wanted to. And my job itself is in marketing, in entertainment marketing, so it's not a direct it's not directly marketing books, but there's a lot of overlap when you look at how you market movies and DVDs and how that relates to marketing books. So that's been
And
helpful.
right. And you mentioned about the education too. And I've, with a master's degree, I've come to realize the best thing that you gain going to school is to learn stick-to-itiveness, to give you the ability to see a project through and actually, especially, when you get the degree. So good for you. So then tell us also about the evolution of your literature career.
Um, so I participated in Nano for a few years, and eventually the one I decided to stick with was a book that was a lot of takes on different tropes and had to do with the underworld. And it was the first book that I really edited and revised and started pitching to agents. And eventually it did land me my agent, and he shopped it around and it was rejected by everybody. It was very nicely rejected. Everyone thought it was a lot of fun and not right for them. And while he was doing this and while he was doing all this pitching, I was working on my second book, which was completely unrelated to the first. So that by the time, we sort of shelved the first book because it wasn't getting any traction, I had a second book that was ready to go and edited and all ready for him to start shopping out. And I think about 5 months or so after he started pitching that one, it got picked up by CamCat.
I did not realize that was your second book
Mm-hmm.
because oh, wow,
Yeah,
see?
I've been rejected a lot.
Oh my gosh. It's almost like having kids. Sometimes you might want to reject the first one because you haven't really gotten it right.
Hope you're not listening.
Janice, can you please mute yourself and the video also? Thank you. Sorry about that. Brandie, are you still there?
Yeah. No,
Okay, yeah,
actually,
there you go.
I was even working on a third book
Uh-huh.
when this book was being pitched out, in the idea of like, well, if this one doesn't get picked up, I want to have something else to work on.
Yes. Oh, I'm even more proud of you. I hadn't realized. I thought it was the first one that finally hit, and then so this is news for me too. Well, good for you. So tell us again about this, if you want to go into the story, the actual story of either the first leading into the second, or whichever one you want to start with.
Sure. I'd say that the second, because since that is the one that got picked up, it's the one that I've been spending most of my time and effort with. And it's completely unrelated to the first. So it's called Gold Spun. It comes out May 11th. And it is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. It's a YA fantasy, but it's told from the miller's daughter's point of view. And in this one, instead of sort of being kind of this helpless pawn stuck in the middle of things, she's actually a con artist. So she kind of starts convincing people that she can make this gold and sort of gets herself in trouble.
That sounds really really entertaining. Can't wait for it. When did you say again it's coming out? In November?
May 11th.
Oh, in May.
I know.
Good.
Now I get to say it comes out this year.
This year, actually. Oh, congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
so now, so what was the first one then about that? Yeah, and are you still working on that, or?
I'm not actively working on it right now, but it's not to say that I wouldn't go back to it at some point. So the first one was about, it was set in a world where all gods and creatures of mythology exist in the modern day. And they're not secretive about it. They just live amongst us. You know, a centaur works at the DMV kind of thing. And the daughter of Hades really wants to visit the living world, because I love sort of the reversal of tropes. So instead of a quest to the underworld, it's a quest to the living world. And there is a toad who gets cursed into being a prince impersonator of the singer. So he joins a cover band, but he really wants to be a toad again. So the two of them end up teaming up and going on an epic road trip to save the world.
You're definitely going to have an audience for that too. Let me tell you,
It was a really fun one to write, and it was fun to research all the different creatures and mythologies.
See, that I can definitely see as an action piece too, either a short or a play or even a television, whatever, some type project where you actually, more of a visual project is what I'm trying to.
It's interesting. I wrote a graphic novel adaptation of it, which is also something that's been shelved at the moment. But I do have a script for that I wrote out, so.
Well, it sounds like you have been very busy and very productive and it's so impressive. So now the third one that it's in the works now. How far are you into that? You probably don't want to talk about as much, but.
I can't talk about as much. I will say, so there is actually a couple of projects. I wrote a draft of a book that's another YA fantasy of Victorian era of sisters who live in a theater and there's magic. And I can't say much more than that, but it was also a lot of fun to write and research. And then I'm currently also revising a draft of the sequel to Gold Spun. So.
Well, you've got quite an audience here at Manuscripters, I tell you, because it touched on topics that a lot of us are interested in. So we have a lot to talk about. And also, before I forget about it, I want to extend an invitation to join us in February too and talk about Rimo. Because it does sound like Rimo is what got you started in the literary aspect of the writing, which is
great. I would be happy to.
Right. And Dan just mentioned, so are you familiar with Sherlockians? The Sherlockian Club?
I'm familiar with Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, well, after you and I are finished, we're going to open up to questions and comments with the whole group, and they can inform you of that.
Would love to. I mean, Benedict Cumberbatch is my favorite Sherlock.
Oh, okay. So we'll see if others agree. So.
But yeah, I think. Oh.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things I loved about Nano, and I know we were sort of discussing this before the record, is when there's some issues, being able to, keep going back and editing. And what I loved about Nano is it gave me permission to put that aside so I could get the draft out.
Okay,
and just the time to edit while trying to do 50,000 words in a month.
Okay, you definitely have to set aside February 6th for us.
February
okay,
6th.
Also to join us. And also you're invited to read anything else, that you wrote during,
because
I don't know how many we might, have also from that particular program, because again, they're hosting their own reading. But you're right now invited to that. Wonderful. And is there anything, any words of wisdom or any type of that you've learned in your process that you want to maybe pass on to us?
I mean, as I mentioned, just keep writing the next story. As I mentioned, I was rejected a lot. And if I didn't have that next project that I was working on, it would have been really, rejection's, I think, always hard. It would have been harder if I didn't have something else that I was also passionate about, where once the novel is out of my hands, once I'm, was submitting it to agents or my agent was submitting it to publishers, I couldn't do more at that stage for that project. So I get antsy if I'm not creating. So working on the next project, whether it's related to that or a completely different book, which oftentimes it was a really good way to focus my energy instead of being really apprehensive as to what was going to happen on that first book. So I think, just keep writing, and finding a tribe is really good. I see that, there's a group here. I think it's my writing friends that have been so helpful to, we build each other up and celebrate successes, and also, provide support during all those rejections.
Absolutely. And a little plug about Southwest Manuscripters. It's the oldest continuously running, still active writers group west of the Rockies, which may not be as great of a whatever, but yeah, so we're definitely trying to keep it together and to interest some young blood. So, and we really want to see if we can keep this going. Want to also mention, so you're talking about, you've gone with a traditional you have been published traditionally.
This will be my debut.
Your debut.
But yeah,
but this isn't indie publishing that we're talking.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between self-publishing and kind of a indie publisher.
Right.
Indie can be traditionally published. So I'm publishing with a publisher, but they are an independent publisher.
Okay, but okay.
But yes. I'm not self-publishing.
Okay, maybe that's what, because a vast, I don't know, but I would say maybe a majority of us are more what would be considered self-publishing. So congratulations on that. And now I want to talk about a little process of hunting down the agent, since he's not here. If you could, which I hope to do have him as a guest sometime and talk about that process. But so tell us about that, because that's been a big stumbling block for a lot of writers.
Well, it is definitely very competitive, and I spent probably a couple of years querying to get an agent. So my agent with Steve Hudson of Wordwise Medias, and the way that I met him was in person, which I always think is ideal if possible. I know it has a lot of hurdles to meet agents in person during the best of times, and basically impossible during quarantine. So hopefully after quarantine, I had done a lot of cold queries, emails that didn't get me anywhere with my first book. And so what really helped me was going to conferences and pitching agents in person. And actually the first time I pitched Steve on my first book, he said to send it to him, which I did. And then he sent me a rejection. And he was very cordial about it. And I thanked him for his time. And then we kept in touch at the different writing conferences and kind of formed a professional relationship that way. And at one point he said that he would send me some notes if I was interested, and if I wanted to revise, he'd take a second look. So that's kind of the way it happened.
What an opportunity for them to offer that is really, so it says, but it's so much, again, to know whom they're working with, as well as whom you may want to work with. And, the networking, they say, is so important.
Yeah.
So, and now you're pretty happy, huh? It's a pretty good, yes.
Very, very excited.
Oh, well, that's great. So is there much of anything before I throw it to the floor? Is there anything else you'd like to have known at this point?
Let's see, the book comes out May 11th. If anyone goes to my site, it's brandiejune.com. So I post a lot of my blogs. I do book reviews. I do interviews with authors. We have giveaways. So hope to see you guys there. And I just appreciate so much you guys having me over here.
Oh, we so appreciate having you. And we hope that you're going to be a regular visitor, or, maybe even a member someday. Who knows? We're a pretty friendly group. So if anyone wants to ask Brandie any questions or make any statements, please feel free to jump on. Yes, Dan?
Yes, hi, Brandie. I'm a writer and a teacher, and I often use drama in my classes, and In the class last semester, I used Trifles by Susan Glass-Bell as kind of a more modern, realistic sort of drama, and Oedipus Rex as more kind of ritualistic. But you were talking about your plays. I'm wondering if your plays are more fantasy or more kind of realistic, because I remember one of our guest speakers, that probably our most famous guest speaker, was Ray Bradbury, who came to speak. Yeah. and I was lucky enough to come to several of the presentations. And one thing he said was, if I write a play and somebody turns on a kitchen sink faucet, then wine comes out, water doesn't come out, because I don't like strictly realistic drama. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about your drama. And
oh, happy to. Although I do actually have a friend of mine has a friend who's a sommelier and actually does have a spout that does wine out of their sink, which I think would be fantastic. I'd say a lot of my plays, I tend to lean towards comedy, which I've always just sort of preferred, both in my writing and in my acting. I've always just loved doing comedy. And looking at my plays, a lot of them sort of are realistic with fantasy elements. So the first full-length play I did, it was an hour-long play for the Hollywood Fringe Festival, which was Oscar Wilde at the end of his life meeting different people from his life. So like his estranged wife and a friend. And then the last person he meets is Dorian Gray. And it's sort of unclear, intentionally unclear if he's, imagining and sort of hallucinating this in his last days, or, if his writing has actually come to life and to torment him. And then the other play that I've recently written, that is, my first full kind of 2-act play that unfortunately I finished like right before the pandemic, and there hasn't been much theater this year, it's a sort of a rom-com retelling of the Psyche and Cupid myth. So they're, Greek gods with magical powers, but it's also, if that was sort of set present day. So kind of that intersection there. So, yeah.
thank you very much. I wanted to say that some of us in the club, I know JP Van Gordon and myself are big Sherlock Holmes fans, and we love the Victorian period. And maybe some people here that, that I don't know about, but thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
That was great hearing about more in depth your playwriting. Anyone else want to mention anything or ask anything of Brandie?
Well, I had a comment.
Go ahead, Doug.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So, hey, thanks for sharing all the your thoughts and background and everything. But one thing that grabbed my attention as you were speaking there was you talked about the first thing you wrote about the people who are actually gods walking around Earth in present day society. And so immediately I began to see images of that in my mind, like, that this would be like a good comedy, like a movie or a weekly TV series, because it sounds like it's a very good idea. And I'm just kind of surprised that nobody wanted to pick up on it. I mean, what's the matter with your writing? Why didn't somebody like it? Because it seems like a great idea.
I think it's a great idea too. So, it's something I'm not actively pursuing at the moment, because there's only so many hours in a day to work on so many projects, but it's definitely a premise that's sort of near and dear to my heart. So who knows what iteration it may show up in someday.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought, wow, that seems like a good idea.
Thank you.
I just have a question. I wondered what does Brandie enjoy most about writing?
Ample cups of coffee. I think what I enjoy most is really getting lost in a story. Like it's what I love most about writing and reading and performing. And especially those times when I will go into it being like, oh, I have a lot of other stuff on my mind and I'm really busy and I don't have much time. But like getting into it and then losing track of time where you're like, oh my gosh, I've been writing for 2 hours just because I've been stuck in this world and it's completely, taken over everything I'm thinking about, which is really also what I love about sharing my stories and what I love about, having other people read what I write or see shows that I've written is, to hope that they also get immersed in the experience.
Yes. Well, having read a little bit of your writing, I'm sure they will.
Thank you.
Brandie, talk about the visual aspects of your writing. Do you write screenplays also, or predominantly just play?
Predominantly just
Stage.
plays.
Stage.
I haven't said that I'm never going to write a screenplay. I may be the one person in LA who doesn't write screenplays. I think part of it maybe that I come from a theater background, and that's sort of I love theater. Even when I wasn't acting as much, I was still regularly going to the theater. And so for me, my playwriting it's almost more of a hobby sometimes and more of a break from writing from my manuscripts, which are also a hobby, but one I'm more actively pursuing. And there's just something I find so magical about writing a play and then being able to see actual people up there living it. So
To actually see the immediacy of it also, which is really, yes. Well, I do screenwriting. So if you ever want to help on transitioning, I wouldn't even know how to go after go towards the format of a stage play, but I know screenwriting and there are different formats for the two. So you're kind of in one or the other. So
yeah, I mean, I would say, if playwriting is something you're interested in, a matter of like reading plays, watching plays, the formatting itself is not, is not the tricky part. I think it's a lot of the, you have to, with a play, you have to figure out a way that it can be done on stage, and they can be done very creatively, but it's a little more, of a challenge than necessarily, you can't just cut away to a completely different location. It needs to be something that can actually, the location can, somehow change on stage and in front of you.
Right. Wow. Well, good for you to even transition from, from the stage writing to literature. And is there anyone else that would like to
I have a
ask
question.
anything? Yes, Ginger.
I have a question. I'm not sure I can frame this right, but when you hear the actors doing your lines, do you sometimes go, oh, whoops, that doesn't work, and change things around? I should think acting would have kind of help you with that before. But
That's actually one of the things I love about playwriting as well, is the ability to hear it. So what I've done with plays that I'm working on before they're, finished, is I will invite some friends over to read it out loud, and whether they're professional actors or not, everyone gets assigned a role. And I'll usually just sit back and take notes. And it's great because that way I can actually, it's a different experience to hear it out loud. And it's also a good chance for me. I can hear, oh, what jokes hit, what jokes don't. Where other people are laughing. Maybe they're laughing at places I didn't even think was funny, or, and it's interesting to see, their own interpretations of it, because sometimes that's very different from what I envisioned, and that doesn't make it wrong. But it's definitely a different experience. But I love being able to sit down and actually hear it out loud. I think that's very helpful. And actually, that's something I've tried to do with some of my writing, especially when I'm in the editing phases, is reading it out loud so I can hear it and try to catch some of the mistakes that I won't necessarily catch if I'm just reading in my head, because my head knows what it's supposed to say.
Thank you.
Dialogue can be the tricky part in any medium.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that too. One of the other things that's interesting with, playwriting, and I imagine with screenwriting, that is somewhat different than writing a novel, is that ability that you have to let a certain amount go. With writing a novel, there's a certain amount of compromise and working with an editor that I found. But with playwriting, once I give that script to the director, it's basically out of my hands. So whatever creative choices the director makes or the actors make, so long as they're not changing my words and my dialogue, they have the creative liberty to interpret things different ways, to stage things different ways. And, I need to go hands off and go and enjoy it almost as a spectator by that point.
Can you expound on any of the relationship with the editor? Do you, any specifics
Sure.
maybe?
What kind of editors are you looking for
On
information on?
Okay, yeah. The literary editor?
Yeah, so I have worked with developmental editors, both I worked with one freelance before I submitted my novel to my agent. And then once I was signed with CamCat Books, they assigned me a publishing editor who also did a lot of developmental editing work, which I actually really enjoy working with an editor. So developmental editors help you edit the story. And then once you get to like line and proofreading, that's more of the grammar stuff. But to me, that's sort of the very last thing you look at, because if you're going to make changes to a story, you don't want to worry about correcting all your grammar if you're going to cut that chapter out or revise it. So the way it's worked for me is that they have, they'll read my book, they'll have, notes and come back to me and we'll discuss them. And usually it's if there's issues on, the pace or things aren't making sense, or, maybe we need to up some tension over here, or, these two characters need a stronger relationship. A lot of times the editors will point that out to me and possibly will brainstorm a bit on how to resolve it. But a lot of times I'll just sort of take all the notes, sleep on it, and then start brainstorming ways to solve those problems myself. And then I will go back in and start revising based on those notes, but it's still ways that I'm strengthening the story. So I've actually really liked it because, on one hand, I'm like, yay, I'm done. And then I find out, no, I'm not done. But looking back, it's always like, oh yeah, it helps, helps inspire me and helps me brainstorm ways to make the story even stronger and more interesting and more compelling.
That's great, because you hear about so many that have such a horrible experience, maybe with mostly in the editing process, because they want you to kill your darlings, and I forget who said the terms about killing your darlings.
It's a balancing act between going into the editing with an open mind and being willing to make changes, but also knowing what elements of your story you feel are critical. And for me, it's always been a matter of, if there's something really, really important, I haven't been asked to change that or kill that. But, some of the other changes I have been asked to make, I do try to go in with an open mind.
Good for you. That's the biggest step to actually success, and then you get big enough, you can tell them how it's going to be.
Right. And finding out, if you're working on a freelance editor, finding out what kind of editing they do. Are they going to be helping you with the story, or are they just going to be checking the grammar? And, a lot of times editors will also do sample pages for you, or a sample, so you can kind of see, does their style work with your style? Because it is kind of a partnership.
Right. Absolutely. Janice wanted to ask, Janice, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. You're very interesting. And I had a question. I really like the show on Star Trek, Who Mourns for Adonis. I guess Dan Lambert knows all the titles. I guess it's on YouTube. I think a lot of times that the right actor certainly can help carry a piece. I wrote here, the episodes about where they go to an alien planet, they always check out, what type of beings are on the planets, and this well, he felt he was Adonis. He believes he's a god and wants the crew members to worship him. I thought it was like he was like Zeus because he would, throw lightning out of his hand. But he wasn't friendly, and the Star Trek crew, they have to control and destroy him. I found myself, and as the crew did, they actually had feelings of feeling sorry for him. And there was one crew member who he wanted to have him worship him, the Yo woman. But my question is, in yours, what was sort of the theme of the people on Earth? Did you have a theme as to, how they would interact with people on Earth who were acting like gods?
Yeah, and well, I haven't seen this episode. It does sound very fascinating, and kind of speaks to kind of a bigger picture with me. I love gray characters. I love villains that you can empathize with, even if you don't sympathize with them. Like in Spun, Rumpelstiltskin is now like this mysterious fairy guy who is no longer just a clear-cut villain. And just in general, in most of my writing, I try to avoid completely black and white characters because I don't find them as interesting. Regarding the first novel I wrote, where the gods, live among us, they aren't the gods themselves. They aren't people. They are actual gods, but it's almost, the power dynamic is almost like they are the really wealthy and elite. So, they don't rule the entire world. And if you look at a lot of the, multi-god pantheons, they're not all powerful. A lot of them have limited power and they're rather petty. So a lot of these gods, are like, I am the god of breadsticks. I rule everything having to do with breadsticks. You want, your side salad, you're going to have to talk to another guy. So they aren't all powerful, but they are, more powerful than people. And it's also not a mystery, they're all hanging out. I was more to challenge myself. I wanted to see what would it look like if all the pantheons exist. So there's one scene during sunset, and you don't just see one sun god. You see, there's like a dozen of them in the sky because they're all, clocking out for the day.
Huh. Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about what you submitted to the library's program, and have you thought of reading it?
I'm not familiar with the library program.
Okay. So when you were talking about that, you weren't talking about it in reference to the
Yes,
PV.
yes, it is. She is referring to a RIMO program. How did you join that, Brandie? When you got involved with RIMO?
So if you go onto rimonano.com, you can just set up your own account and kind of keep track of how many words you write in the month of November. And it doesn't have to be affiliated with any other group other than Nano. One of the things I love about Nano is a lot of the libraries and different bookstores get involved with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great to have that additional support. But for me, it was just stuff I was writing on my own, and I was keeping track of my words in Nano and, going to some write-ins.
You were working with the mothership.
Yes.
We had a satellite program at our local library here. That's why. Yes. But so, yes, we definitely want to have you come and join us in November next month, because you can actually tell us about how it is participating at the national level. Mm-hmm. And again, we were just participating in the local level.
I wanted to say that, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to get a little commercial for Chris Beatty's book, No Plot, No Problem. This is the novel writing kit. And I believe he was the person who started NaNoWriMo. And I too have participated. I have never actually completed a novel during National Novel Writing Month. So, my hat comes off to Brandie. Congratulations for.
Well, I will say, whatever you've written during Nano was more words than what you had before.
Yes.
And even when I have completed Nano, all of my novels ultimately end up being more than 50,000 words, and all of them end up needing lots of revisions post Nano.
But this is exciting to know, because those of you who have participated actually on the national level would be really nice to hear from and join us also. And
and
so bring some writings, if you know, some excerpts, if you wouldn't mind also maybe reading something too. And Dan also, and anyone else who has participated in any aspect of Rimo.
Yeah, and I've, you know, because now when you clarified for me, I realized, you know, I've done stuff with the national, I guess the national level. I've done stuff with a, you know, kind of a more of a local branch, and then, you know, this year versus other years, it's the difference of I've, you know, having done things in person with groups versus online, and kind of what I've done with it post nano. And this year I was a nano rebel, so
Oh,
this year I gave myself the task of editing 50,000 words instead of writing, because I was on an editing deadline.
good.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, but this is a great segue into even, you know, leading into next month. So this is really exciting to hear more about the whole program. Is there anyone else that'd like to ask or anything of Brandie?
Yeah, Dan talked about he has a problem with, was that formatting, Dan? Can you explain that at all?
Well, I kind of go with what Ray Bradbury said. He said he was really kind of cynical about screenwriting, and I can kind of understand why he would say, if you have an idea, just do it as a novel. Is his advice, because as a screenplay, you know, your screenplay may or may not be optioned, and for a novel, you or somebody else can, you know, can transform it into a screenplay. But I don't know, screenplays, I you know, I have final draft, but then for me, I get kind of stuck on, you know, the options in final draft. You know, it's almost like there are too many options to, and you know, as far as log lines and, you know, where everything should be. Final draft is supposed to do that for you, but I get kind of hung up on the kind of the mechanics of writing rather than thinking about the story. And I think when I've tried playwriting as Brandie does, it's a little simpler, easier for me. I don't know why, because I mean, it's not that it's easier to format, but for some reason it's more intuitive. And but I think that I'm especially, for some reason, just seem to be attuned to prose. Like, okay, there's, you know, here's quotation marks for dialogue and that sort of thing. So maybe I need to hire Jeri to help me with my screenplays. I don't know.
Talking about screenwriting, there are actually two aspects of screenwriting. One is the technical, which is the spacing, which is something that Final Draft and those programs help tremendously. The other is the content.
Mm-hmm.
No, and the latest is every single camera angle should be a separate sentence.
Oh.
So to know when to break when you're focusing on one character or action into the next.
Maybe
Well, that's
that's
another-
why I do playwriting.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah, with screenwriting, you have to worry, is it a spec script? Is it, you know, should I be formatting this
everything,
as shot by
everything
shot?
has to be,
you know?
everything has to be a spec script until you're
Okay.
actually technically doing it. You only write a spec. But also, coming up, this is plug for a future guest speaker too, is the man who is conducting a meetup group called the Screenwriting Tribe, which is something I have joined lately. So
Wow.
actually, I've been since about March.
And I
But,
want to plug another book, if I may.
Sure.
There's a book, I think it's called Script Writing by J. Michael Straczynski, and he is somebody who has done graphic novels, he's done plays, he's done screenplays, you know, he's done TV, and he has all the formats in there for all the different, you know, types of writing. So.
Oh, that's interesting. The differences, huh?
Yeah, I've you know, I've used Scrivener for my playwriting. I also use Scrivener for outlining. I don't use Final Draft, and I also don't do screenwriting, so I can't speak too much technically. But what I've just found for my writing, whether it's a novel or a play, the important thing for me is to first get out a draft. Second, make sure I'm happy with the story, and then worry about formatting. Because
I would kind of have to agree with that. I've written a couple of screenplays, one of which actually got reviewed or considered. But so when the screenplays that I wrote, I don't know if this will help you, Dan, but the first thing is I try to write the story and the emotional content between the main characters, and then worry about the formatting later. So what I do is I try to write like in sections, like I like something happens. There'll be a beginning and an end to a scene where something emotional happens or something moves the story forward. And I just write that. I don't worry about format. I just write it, and then format it a little bit into the characters back and forth, back and forth. But the idea is to get the content down, the emotional content down within the structure of the story of setting up the action. There's a problem, and then you resolve it. And in the old days, I still do this. I would write sections, and then I would print it out, and I would lay them on the floor. And so I'd have a scene where a certain type of action would happen, and I'd say, well, does this go on page 22, or should I move it further on the story to page 100? So I'd move around chunks of the story, move around chunks of the emotion into action, then worry about the formatting later.
Alex's program, I have totally stopped. I no longer have to worry about the incident in 3 minutes. Oh, it's a fantastic program from Alex. The program
Is that Janice?
My wish is for every woman who is suffering from urinary incontinence.
I'm sorry, is someone asking a question of Brandie? Or if not, if their mics are on?
There's a disembodied voice somewhere.
To get back to,
Maybe it's the
again,
spirit.
in anything, you have to have the heart of the story, like
Yeah,
Doug, like Dan, Brandie is saying, absolutely, and then worry about. Trouble is, especially with screenwriting, if it's not in the specific format, but again, that's the polishing aspect.
Yeah.
Was there
Sure.
someone saying? I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead. Brandie.
I just to add to that too, something that might help that was actually something I did when I worked on a graphic novel, because I'm not an artist at all, but I wrote the story for a short story that was submitted to a Cthulhu anthology, which is why I was pulling it off the shelf. And to help visualize it, I actually did stick figures of all the panels, which is not necessarily the technical way to write a script for it. But it helped me translate it. And it was actually sure enough that I showed it to the artist, who was then able to translate it into the story. So, this is like the page of the final version. And then my version, when I submitted it to her first, was, stick figure of, boy with rock. And so that was one way, at least it helped me sort of visualize and place things.
Can you tell us a little more, Brandie, about your graphic novel?
Sure. So it's the Cthulhu is hard to spell, the terrible twos.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Cthulhu. So here's my little friend here.
Oh, I love it.
And I thought you said Cthulhu. I wanted to verify. Yeah, I'm a big Lovecraft fan, and I've done even Cthulhu type poetry. So that's great. That's great.
Awesome.
Is it available for sale? Or?
It is. If you go onto my website under short stories, it's listed there.
Okay.
Or Jeri can get you my info, I'm sure. But basically, we were all taking Lovecraft stories and putting them in different settings.
Wow.
So mine is, Bachrog meeting up with a little boy at camp, at a summer camp. And for that, it was a whole different process too, because it was partnering, I was partnering with an artist for it, since, otherwise mine would be all stick figures. And it was that kind of back and forth too of, here's my initial idea, here's sort of how I see it coming together, with writing out the script as well as my stick figure drawing for her. And then her coming back with sketches and with ideas of her own on the best ways, to visually represent. And we are actually sort of brainstorming for another submission for it. So we'll see if that works out.
Now,
Well,
did that one, wasn't there connection in with something about the writers of the future, or what is that, didn't you
No.
win a contest or something, or?
No,
That was
Russell Nolte is the editor on this. So he We did a Kickstarter though for it, where all the creators of it, collaborated to, promote the Kickstarter and really help get the word out so that we could have the funds to produce the book.
That's
Wow.
great. Yeah. And for those of you who may not know, Cthulhu is this monster that is asleep or dead under the ocean, and someday is going to rise up and take over the world and destroy humanity. And to make Cthulhu, cute and like Brandie has done, it's very funny, but it's also it's scary but cute. So I like the artwork there on the cover. Very nice.
To make it palatable for a 2-year-old, huh?
Yeah, it's because this is the second book in the series. I wasn't involved in the first, but the neat thing is that since it's all different artists and writers, you get a lot of different stories. Some are much darker, others are much more humorous. It's all full color. You see a lot of different art styles. And while the stories vary widely, Russell made sure that all of the stories, there's no swearing, no gratuitous violence, no gratuitous sex. So even though some of the themes are really dark, it's a book that, you could hand to a kid and be like, here, enjoy this. So
It's the gateway book, huh? To the whole.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. You guys have
to, dark elder gods.
Wow. So anyone, Dan, tell Brandie about the little background with the connection between Manuscripters and Ray Bradbury.
Oh, yes. Ray Bradbury, when he first started writing and came out with his first novels, came to our club as a beginning writer. And we were the first club that recognized him as an up and coming writer. And he was at some of our very earliest meetings. And as a result, he became our mentor and came every year, except when his wife died, to our meetings. We'd have a special meeting just for him, and they got huge. It would be children sitting on the floor in front of him. He'd be talking. It'd be a huge
200
crowd.
and some people.
It was an amazing thing until he passed away.
Oh, that's
And he
fantastic.
will always be our inspiration and mentor.
Wow, that's
We have a bit of a claim to fame,
Mhm.
Ray. But he thought highly of the group and all. So we're not just some podunk, west of the Rockies group. We have some cred. Aw.
Hey,
And
as long as you're writing, you're a
absolutely-
writer.
He absolutely adored Bernadette.
He adopted Bernadette. Bernadette's, say hi, Bernadette. He called
Hi.
her, Brandie, he called Bernadette his other daughter.
Aw,
Yes,
that's incredible.
and every day he just asked me, "Are you
I
writing?"
don't know if you were able to see or have read any of Ray Bradbury's plays that he's had produced, like in Pasadena and so forth. Very interesting. He did Fahrenheit. Is it 474? I can't remember the numbers.
451.
451.
Yeah, 451. A very, very interesting production. And then I saw another one. I think he did something about, I can't remember. I think, what is it? Dan, you were there, where he talks about,
Yeah, he did one it was kind of 3 plays that were interrelated that were about his time when he lived in Ireland writing the screenplay
Right.
for Moby Dick, and it's called Drunken in Charge of a Bicycle.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
in the town in Ireland where he stayed, that was one of the laws that you could break, and typically, or I guess more often than in most places, people would get into bicycle accidents, because they were drunk. And then there was another one called, well, you know what, I'm going to have trouble remembering it, but it was a futuristic story. And I actually went and saw it with Marianne Golden, who was one of our former members.
Right.
And
all the way.
I got to see the Fahrenheit 451 play in Pasadena, but I was not there on the night that Ray Bradbury decided to come and sit in the back row, unfortunately.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Such history.
Yes, we've got a
And
really rich history. That's
I
what
actually
Oh, that's
was
it.
lucky.
Yes,
I
thank
was
you.
actually lucky enough to go see somewhere in the South Hollywood area.
La Cienega. There's a
Yeah,
theater in
could
La
have been
Cienega.
a
Yeah.
play called Leviathan 99, who had William Marshall playing the captain of a ship that went out to look for a Moby comet, like a Moby whale, only a comet. And it was the same idea of a story as
Comet.
Moby Dick, but it was a comet. And it was an amazing play. And it was only put on once, as far as I know. But we saw also several different versions of Martian Chronicles done in both small and large theaters in Hollywood. But I'm just blowing my own horn here.
Van, was that a single, a one act play?
Um,
Was it a one act play?
my screen went blank. It says Ginger, but there's nobody there.
I know, and I can't fix it, so I just thought I'd talk anyway.
Well, it was done, the first one was done on a very small stage.
But was it a
I-
one act play? Is that?
Well, it was actually done in such a way that you didn't have division between the acts. It was like
okay.
almost like a radio play done on stage, but with costumes. And the second one was done on a much bigger theater. I thought the smaller theater was much more interesting.
Brandie, you've sparked a comparison between your multi-talents and Ray Bradbury's being a playwright and
All right, I couldn't ask for anything more.
literary. And so now we have to segue you into screenwriting, and you've got plenty of time for that. So
Dita,
yeah, me and me and Ray, we've got it. Oh.
Yeah, I will say when whenever life can get back to mingling amongst people again, I highly recommend the Hollywood Fringe Festival. That's where I had my first play put up, and it's great because you have so many different plays and so much new work all coming together. It's a great place to go see a bunch of new theater, but it's also a great place, if you have written a play, and are interested in putting one up. So
keep us posted about that, because we do have playwrights in the group also. One in particular isn't with us today, but Casey also, who's here today, very, very active in theater.
Yeah.
So we can actually help advertise that too.
When, it's usually held in June. I don't know what year it'll be back. They unfortunately had to cancel last year, but at some point I'm sure we'll be back to seeing theater in person.
Well, we all look forward to seeing each other when it's safe, which is so, again, as a grandparent for me, it's although I did see him last summer, but oh wow, it's hard.
Well, hopefully the vaccines will roll out.
Be available and effective and very quickly. Yes. Dan, you want to say something else? You have your hand up.
Yes, no, my hand was already up from, and I just did not put my hand down, but thank you. And no, the play I could not think of, I think it was called Wisdom 2016. And it was about, I believe it's about a married couple that their relationship was on the rocks, and there's one of them turns himself into a robot. I know it sounds like an old Twilight Zone episode, but it was a play by Ray Bradbury, and I'm just trying to look it up on the internet, but I just want to thank, Brandie for being here with us. And I think we need more, more fantasy authors and more horror science fiction authors. And so this is great. Thank you.
Yeah, I love making stuff up.
We won't hold that against you. In fact, we appreciate it. Aww. Well, this has been, anything else anybody want to? Brandie, you've been that breath of fresh air that I knew you were going to be.
Thank
Love
you.
your enthusiasm, love your energy, and just, I think from the minute I first met you, I said, okay, this is a gal that has a lot to say and has a lot to help us with. So
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
great. Again, anyone else want to say anything before we maybe sign off?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
I would like to make a recommendation
Yes.
to Brandie. Chat books are really good. DAW used to do this, DAW publishers come out with a chat book in which you show excerpts, various first chapters, various first paragraphs of all your different works in a small, very cheaply made book, and use it as promotional item. Either sell it very cheaply on Amazon or give it away at bookshelves. Is a really good idea.
I might, that's really interesting, and I probably really good promotional. I don't think I can, actually at this point, I don't think I can sell something that has my work from Spun because I now have a contract for it. But I know they're always big into promotional pieces. So, that is a kind of good sort of portfolio of all the different works that, are available.
Well, I encourage everyone to go to Brandie's site. What is that again, Brandie?
It's Brandie June. So Brandie with an IE and June like the month.
.com.
Here, I can put it in the chat.
Yes, and again, it's also in the announcement for today's meeting. And again, a reminder for January 19th at 6 p.m. Go through the libraries, go through the site listed on the announcement for today's meeting to register for the library's rival of anthology readings. And also next February 6th, Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m., our next Southwest Manuscripters meeting. And Brandie, we hope to see you there too. And Elizabeth and anyone else that's new on today. So really appreciate this. So I guess if that's it, we'll go ahead and sign off for the day. Thank you everyone for showing up.
you.
Brandie,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brandie.
Thank you.
Thank you. In touch. Take care.
All right.
Everybody
Stay
stay healthy.
Yeah.
Believe me, it's
Together.
important.
Yes.
Yes.
Safe and healthy. Thank you, Van.
Mhm.
I will be
Everyone
reading
take care.
Cthulhu, so.
Mhm.